interdimensional invaders. More blood of this. More blood. Destroy the child. Corrupt them all. Make fun of me all you want. This is their plan, people. They're frickin' interdimensional invaders. More blood of this. More blood. Destroy the child. Corrupt them all. Give it to me, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it. Baby, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it. Baby, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it.
Hello, and welcome back to Understanding Propaganda. I'm here tonight with a man who needs no introduction, the one and only Ryan Dawson. Ryan, what's going on?
I got my Twitter back. Isn't that amazing?
That is pretty amazing. I've gone through 2 or 3 accounts. They just keep shutting them down. So I don't really have any faith in true free speech because we all know there's a couple things that we can't talk about.
Well, even when you can, the inundation is stupid that surrounds so many subjects from the cucosphere makes it impossible to get anything done, even when you are saying everything accurately. Like I have this Epstein map behind me, right? Painstakingly put that together over the years, and people are still out there going, where's the client list? Or someone just lazily copied the black book and cut and pasted all the names, says here's the list. Like you can have very accurate information on September 11th, which I've done, on Jeffrey Epstein, on JFK, as you know, and it doesn't matter because it just becomes one of the theories grouped in with a bunch of retarded ones, as if they're all equivalent, and they're not. And this is for historical things, scientific things, political things. The cucosphere is amplified to the millionth degree on social media, and accurate journalists are constantly playing the whack-a-mole game where they're kicked off this, kicked off that. So yeah, I don't know. Like I hardly ever talk about September 11th anymore because it doesn't matter, right? I can go over all the information that we know that's in our own FBI's report and JIS report and so on, and it's just, someone else can pop in and denying airplanes and talking about thermite grenades or whatever, and 2 million people see it,
So what is the proper response from journalists? To continue or to go do something else?
I think on the social media platforms, we found out from Twitter files what we all suspected, right? Like the FBI was in there. All the 3-letter networks were in there. And that's who's censoring people. And I believe that's who's also the opposite of a shadow ban. Like they dial up the nonsense, the Alex Jones, the Stu Peters, or whatever. They would dial that up. Jones finally got in trouble after his school shooter denial stuff took him down. But he's already been replaced. This Stupider's guys, saying the Ukraine war is fake and just, virus denier, all that stuff. So, like, you're never going to get Fauci for doing illegal gain of function research in Wuhan because they're doing gain of function research on a virus. If you have people who don't think viruses are real, and I'm just like, hey, guys, please let the adults talk. So, what I think the answer is we already know people are shadow banned and retarded stuff gets pumped up, and it's not all just because they're getting more juice. It's because people are dumb. But Substack and things like that, when Cy Hirsch posted his article on the Nord Stream bombing, we all knew Russia didn't bomb their own pipeline. And we all know it wasn't 6 guys on a yacht either, the unwet passport, right? He put it directly to Substack. He didn't go to the New York Times or the New Yorker or any of the places where he's written things before because he knew he couldn't. He also wouldn't just stick it on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube because A, it would get banned. B, no one would see it because if it's truthful, they'll derank it. So he went straight to Substack. We just need one place to break the media monopoly. And, knock on wood, but Substack seems to be where it's at. And then for video sites, it's sort of a combination with the Rumble, Rockman, Odysee. And if you're not doing live, I guess Bitchute, but Bitchute has been kookified. Like you have to turn the comments off on every video because it's just Spurger, like the Asperger Olympics over there.
Well, one thing I find about these other platforms is they're very clicky. And if you're in with the right clique of the people who are doing the promotion behind the scenes, or you're not, and you're either making a lot of money or you're making no money. So you find the same pitfalls that you find everywhere else.
Yeah, as far as I don't think Substack really cares though. Like,
right.
It's just put whatever. That's why I think that's the best one. The rest of them are cliquish and they don't do a good job policing content that's not supposed to be on there. Things that are copyrighted, they just let people pirate and stuff because they're all anarchists. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna quit using you then.
So over the past many years, you and I have had many a conversation, and I kind of feel like a lot of the information that you have relevant to history really doesn't get exposed the way it should in your research into the modern times. I mean, there's things about history that you've made me aware of that still you never talk about ever. Even going to the Civil War, you don't really talk about much about the Civil War.
Dealing with the backlash is why it's like my brother too. My brother has uncovered the so-called lost colony. Like he did. He's 100% right. And the other day, the History Channel, which just has history in the name, it's not really a history channel, just were flat out denying it. They did the whole bit about the lost colony, and they acted like they didn't know what the word Croatoan meant. And they even made like, maybe it means good luck. In fact, it wasn't even the whole word. They just said Crow, C-R-O. It's Croatoan, and that's the name of a people and an island, and it's where the colonists had visited in the prior years to there being a lost colony. There's no question where they went. They wrote it down. But they just make it a mystery because it sells tickets, it gets people, ooh, what's that? And they do the same thing with Stonehenge and all these other sites. It's like, these are not mysteries at all. But you made them into it, and you pretend like no one's ever figured any of this out, and it's just not true. And that's what's happened is the Hollywood in the entertainment industry has taken over history. Because I can tell you, one Hollywood film, even when they say it's fiction, it doesn't matter whether it's Pocahontas to Braveheart, that becomes what people think of as the history. And poor historical writers don't have a chance. I mean, like, even literary plays have done. I mean, Shakespeare's Macbeth has changed there's the actual Macbeth story, and there's the bullshit one. Well, which book do you read in school? You read Macbeth by Shakespeare. You don't read his history about it. So the entertainment has taken over, and it frustrates me to no end because I know a lot of really interesting historical things that would change people's perspectives on like how things came to be. And I just feel like I'm yelling into the wind, though, because they're like, nah, you have to spend an enormous amount of time debunking the nonsense and propaganda that they've been spoon-fed in from school and TV and so on. And it's like it sucks the energy out of my soul. Like I don't want to talk to someone that's not ready to listen.
But is anybody?
Some are, but like that's why I talk to you. Like some of the stuff I've told you in private, you're like, man, why don't you ever say that? How come you don't talk about Kennedy more or whatever? You know, all this shit. And I'm like, because I can't stand the kooks, man. And like my plate's full. I will, and I have, and I've tackled all these subjects, but I do them one at a time. I'm like, no, I got enough like no planar enemies right now that I have to deal with, because there's true hatred for these people because they're egomaniacs, and when you make them feel dumb when you prove them wrong, and so they take it very personal, and they will personally attack you and defame you and follow you around online and harass you. And I'm like, why? Because I said an airplane hit the Pentagon. Yeah, that's all it takes. You know, like they get so butthurt about it. And you know, I've pissed off the no planers. I've pissed off like the race realist as the new one that's after me. There's all these little factions. They make little cults online. Um, and it's just not worth the headache. Like this stuff is not. If I were to lay out the history, like you were alluding to, like the American Civil War, people have it's in books. Like you can read what actually happened. Like they lie about that war as much as every other war. With Stinking Lincoln, he's got a giant statue in DC on a throne, you know. Like uh if people knew who that man really was. But it doesn't, I don't think they want to know. Like they like the fairy tale better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just that's what becomes like he was challenging the Federal Reserve. I see this meme all the time where they've got like Lincoln and Kennedy and Gaddafi, and I'm like, none of these guys did what you think they did. Kennedy limited who could issue silver certificates. He was not anti-Fed. Fed didn't even exist when Lincoln was alive. The Fed comes in 1913, and his greenbacks did not pay for the war. He paid for the war by selling war bonds, which were paid by stolen gold from the South. Gaddafi was not making a gold dinar. That's not why Libya was invaded. Libya was invaded after the revolution in Egypt. Reopened the Suez Canal for the Maritime Silk Road, which allowed Iranian Libyan ships to trade uh, without having to use the Israeli middleman. Saddam was not doing the petrodollar nonsense either. Europe did not attack Iraq with the United States to save the dollar or Libya. But Israel did get 3/4 of its oil from Iraq. Like these things are always this petrodollar stuff they're saying about Ukraine too. Like that is a swerve to get you barking up the wrong tree, so you don't see the Israeli hand behind Syria, Iraq, Libya, and Ukraine. I mean, all the war. We're coming up to the 20th anniversary of the Second Iraq War, 20 years ago, right? 2003, they invade. March 20. That it's
All of these things
it
seem to have
wasn't
something
about
in
oil. It
common.
wasn't about the petrodollar. It wasn't about limiting China or anything either, because China did get the oil. It was the Office of Special Plans. Like they literally put a group of Zionists and the Pentagon that lied about yellow cake uranium from Niger, aluminum tubes, weapons under the palaces. That was William Sapphire. And then, of course, the anthrax with James Woolsey, Fred Barnes, Gary Schmidt, Robert Kagan, William Crystal. And then the Office of Special Plans is lying about this is Doug Feith and Richard Pearl, right? And later Paul Wolfowitz, Michael Ledeen, David Wormser. You start to see a pattern. It's not a Presbyterian issue here. It's like a bunch of Zionist Jews lied about Iraq because that's Israel's enemy. And America went over there and pounded the hell out of them. And they did not have anthrax or mobile weapons labs or chemical weapons under the palaces or any other kind of WMD. And they knew that. But it wasn't the oil companies that lied about it. And all these Israelis weren't making this up to save the dollar. They already invaded Iraq in the first Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no euro back then. Like they just hear this story like, oh, petrodollar. No, you know what that does? That increases the demand for. I was like, I know what it is, but you're wrong. It has nothing to do with why they invaded Iraq. And like every single pre-war lie came from a neocon cabal of Zionists, all of it, and they hated Saddam. They literally wrote policy papers for a foreign leader. Like people in the United States, like Richard Pearl, are writing policy papers for Netanyahu, right? The clean break strategy, and saying how they have to topple Iraq and Syria. Pat Buchanan commented, the road to Damascus runs through Baghdad. Iraq had to be taken out first. That was an Israeli war, and they don't know.
I mean, this all seems to go back to Odysee and the.
Yes, it does. Yeah, in the 80s, Oded Yanan, I put a big chunk, a paragraph in my movie about Syria in there, where they describe dividing Iraq along sectarian lines between Kurd, Shia, and Sunni, and getting internal fighting. Every Arab on Arab conflict benefits Israel. Da da da. And yeah, Clean Break was building off of Oded Yanan. And how many people know about Oded Yanan? Like, I kind of put that out there, but I'd almost have to personally know you for you to know about it, because even when you stick it in a film and you source it and you screenshot it and you put it in front of the face, the name and the document just, you know, and I don't know what to do. Like, we're dealing with a generation of people, like some of the women can't name 3 countries, and people are just, they're doing a lot of drugs and infotainment, and they can't retain information, they can't retrieve information. I asked someone, you know, stuff that happened in 2003, forget about it. It's not just Zoomers, it's millennials, it's Gen X, it's all of us. Something happened. And I this is funny and not funny, but if you think about in the past, things like hookworm and lead poisoning, when lead was put in gasoline in the 20s, that went on for decades, and it had a global effect on lowering IQ by about 15 points, because people are driving around in this stuff and they're getting slow brain damage. And that should scare everyone, that they put a substance in something, in gas, like so automobiles, because they mixing lead with their octane, and everyone was getting mild lead poisoning or worse, and everyone got more aggressive and dumb. And then Japan phased it out, Norway phased it out. The US didn't get rid of it until the 80s. You could get leaded or unleaded, you know. And that's a mental toxin. I'm wondering if there's something else like that going on now. Like, we don't, it's not lead, it's something else, because everyone's dumb. It's idiocracy. And I'm wondering, like, what, is there something in the food?
Well, how
Is
much
there,
of a role do you think the pandemic played in that?
how could you have even gotten the pandemic if you didn't have Chicken Little panic culture to begin with? Like, these are the people that created toilet paper shortages because Facebook told them to. And then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if enough people go out and hoard toilet paper, then you really do run out of toilet paper, even though there was nothing wrong on the supply side. People are going around buying trucks full of it like it's a game. So they're always this close to panic, right? That doomsday clock, it ought to be like, 2 minutes to panic. The freakazoids kind of like to be afraid, like Tool song, vicariously from a distance. They want to watch things die. Yeah, the scandemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, like, they lost their minds, and they just, we just have to do something. I'm like, you don't just do something to do something if that something is dumb. And it was dumb. The lockdowns, the mask, and the vaccine were all pointless. It doesn't stop the spread. It doesn't stop the severity. It doesn't stop you from getting it. There was no point in vaccines or boosters. All the lockdowns did was depreciate the value of commercial and residential property so that places like BlackRock and Vanguard could go gobble it up. BlackRock and Vanguard to give a historical analogy, are kind of like the modern day East India Tea Company, where you've gotten to a point, you know what I mean, like where a corporation is the size of a state or many states. These corporations are bigger than some countries, as was the Dutch and the East India Tea Company. They were huge, and we've got that going on now. And they used the pandemic to manipulate real estate. They could buy it up.
Well, that era is also important because the Dutch East India Company was the first. That was the creation of a new asset class in stocks, and that transformed the world.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
so
that whole ability to kind of piggyback off, like all the wealthy piggyback off through speculations.
so referencing the Yan'an plan again, would you say that what's happening to the West and attempted to the world is a modern day extrapolation of the Yan'an plan?
I wish everyone would go read it. I posted it on my forum. I guess I can repost it, but
I just can't help see the similarities between the Yan'an plan and what's happening in all throughout the world, and particularly the West.
it's been followed to the letter pretty much. And yeah, I mean, I agree. They did their plan in Iraq. They kind of got halfway there through the Syria. I mean, it's because Russian intervention that ISIS failed. They were winning in 2013. Tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day in the U.S. That's the anniversary of when Syria shot down an Israeli F-16 that the U.S. paid for and gave them, with an S-200 that they got from Russia. And
lately, it seems Israel's been very emboldened. The attack in Iran has gone unanswered thus far.
They attacked Syria again too. Well, it's unanswered because it would bring down the wrath of the United States. Iran and Syria know.
But how much wrath is that really today?
It's bad. Because U.S. is not going to fight a even peer. They're not going to fight with Russia or China, but they'll mess with Syria. Like, they just found today where the U.S. China sent in humanitarian tents, and the U.S. confiscated them and used them for themselves in Syria. If Syria could take on Israel in a one-on-one, but it would never be the case. Like, Americans will not even do anything for their own interests, but they'll do it on behalf of Israeli interests in a second. You know, if Israel got attacked, then like, you better be ready almost for nuclear war, because they own our politicians and they own our media. And, you know, Israel can and has attacked Syria several times this year, all through last year, year before that. They've been doing airstrikes and using cruise missiles, attacking Damascus and killing people. Not a single incident of this has been on any three-letter network or major paper in the U.S. They don't even talk about it, which lets you know, to learn who rules over you, see who you're not allowed to criticize. You know goddamn well, if Syria attacked Israel, even in response to Israel attacking them, that the story would start in the middle, and that it was unjustified and unprovoked attack, just like they said about Ukraine, that had been murdering over 14,000 people in the Donbass for 8 years before Russia moves in. But they start the story in the middle and go, oh,
that's a pattern throughout history.
Israel was attacked out of the blue because of anti-Semitism or something. And, Syria just wanted another Holocaust or whatever. And then completely ignore how the West and Israel's been physically attacking Syria with missiles. That's a complete violation of a sovereign state. Like, you're shooting missiles into their capital. What if they shot missiles into Tel Aviv, which is the capital of Israel, not Jerusalem?
Right.
What would happen?
You think we'll ever see that?
I wish. I mean, like, it's what they deserve. I don't want anybody firing missiles at anybody, but Israel is like, you have erased all other options. Like, violence is the only thing they listen to. You can't negotiate with psychopathic serial liars and deceivers. Like, they don't care. They know what they're doing is wrong. They know it's not defense. They're trying to expand territory. So if it happens, I'm like, well, it was predictable. I mean, the same thing with Russia and Ukraine. It's not like I wanted a war, but I expected one. It was like, well, you keep poking the dog or the bear, it'll bite you. What'd you think was going to happen?
Mhm.
Just going to sit there and murder people in Donbass indefinitely? You're just going to colonize Palestinians for infinity? Like, they're going to fight back. They're going to resist. And eventually they're going to catch you on the nose.
I just don't see Iran just taking this one on the chin. I mean, this is the first time that I can recall that it was such a blatant attack in Iran and taken place by the Israelis.
Iran
So-
is not worried about a U.S. invasion. They're worried about like a Azerbaijan Azeri rebellion from within the Iran, sponsored by the CIA.
Is that a real possibility?
If I
would
was the
think-
CIA and I wanted to mess up Iran, like going in with the Air Force is not a good idea. Iran's got mountainous terrain, good defense. Iran could counter that by hitting Saudi Arabia with cruise missiles and wiping out the northern oil fields, put the whole world on economic lockdown. So it's kind of like you're all going down with this situation. But a rebellion from within, especially if they got the Azeris and even 2% of them participated, they're like 25% of the population in the north. So it would really disrupt things in Iran, and they'd have another Ajax moment. Like the intelligence is the weak point there. They have a very tribalistic society, and it's very easy to get factions to fight with other factions. They don't have a sense of like Persian or Iranian nationalism. It's this clique versus this clique, which was intentionally sowed, that type of division in identity politics, so that you keep the plebs divided and fighting with each other. So,
well, Iran has seemingly been enemy number one always for the Israelis, but for us, 79, once they actually kicked us out, coincidentally, the year of the birth of Islamic terrorism.
Israel was cool with Iran until 79 as well, and they received a large amount of oil from them. Jimmy Carter's book, Peace Not Apartheid, went over that, and I'm sitting there going, they're getting everything from the Sinai Peninsula and Iran. But in 79, that's cut off because of the revolution. And so what happens within 2 years? The Iran-Iraq War. All throughout the 80s, these two were fighting each other, and then Israel was laughing all the way to the bank.
I just can't help but think back to quotes from like Ben Gurion, specifically talking about just smashing the entire Middle East and taking it all over. So, anytime I see that they have good diplomatic relations with a country, I mean, that's just always on the surface, because you can guarantee they're screwing them somehow behind the scenes.
They'll stab you in the back every time. I don't know why anybody would listen or work with the Israelis. Ben Gurion was the principal architect for stealing uranium from the United States and illegally building and secretly building nuclear weapons.
So one of the biggest clues for me on in regard to the relationship between the United States and Cuba throughout the period post Bay of Pigs was that, I came to realize that the Israelis and the Cubans were doing covert ops under the guise of like some sort of relations organization, right? And so that made me realize that, the CIA is working with the Israelis, of course, and the Cubans are working with the Israelis, of course. What are the odds that we're really going against Cuba?
What's
during
the
this
classic
time?
excuse for the Bay of Pigs, right? Well, there's a lack of air support.
Right.
It's the quite opposite. There's a lack of ground support, and partly because a lot of the weapons you thought were there had been diverted to Israel.
Right. And then that brings in like Inter Armco out of Virginia, and then Samuel Cummings, and that whole network and infrastructure of arms importing and exporting, which directly connects to Kennedy and a dozen other things. Yep. So it's really amazing when you start to see the web of history and how it all interconnects. It's like, it's
you
unbelievable.
You could float that whole Miami cell with Ted Shackley back to Laos in the whole war in Vietnam.
Yep.
But pretty good.
It's unbelievable that the
Doug
JM Wave
Valentine's
station
got
got
some
to.
good books on that too.
Oh, he's the best as far as strength of the pack and strength of the wolf. I mean, those are like mandatory reading. But it's just amazing that the JM Wave station got to operate, for as long as they did on American soil. And there were a bunch of American CIA stations at the time that were all under the guise of like domestic business, which is
like the Washington Post, no.
or Life magazine, and our boy
Yeah.
CD Jackson's always a
Yeah.
favorite character of
OSS.
mine.
Oh, that
That
guy
fucking
is such
guy.
scum. No one knows his name.
Well, I tell people about what happened at Buchenwald, and then I'm like, yeah, that's the guy who picked up, the Zapruder film on November 22nd. It's like, really?
Oh, I know. That's
supposed to trust that fucking guy?
That's a mind-blowing moment, or ought to be. But if you're talking about like the denazification, bringing in the city of Weimar and Buchenwald, it showed them just this utter, like, believe it or not, kind of Hollywood display of just ridiculous shrunken heads and lampshades and whatever, like you're not allowed to debunk the alarmist propaganda without someone throwing the baby out with the bathwater and going, oh, so you think the whole thing was fake, like 6 million crisis actors and you love Hitler and rah, 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 rah. It's like, look, it's admitting they didn't build soap and furniture out of body parts isn't promoting Hitler or like denying anyone was thrown in camps and killed. It just means they didn't make ashtrays out of pelvic bones and stuff. But the fact that they went on this like circus type of dumb portrayal of evil and lied to all these Germans they brought in there shows you that this Hollywood style, and in Hollywood and OSS are like this, right? Propaganda bled into the general public later, right? It didn't stay contained. There's still people today that think that Auschwitz was turning people into soap and that different bodies had different color smoke and stuff. Like, and that kind of retarded stuff needs to be debunked, because if you don't debunk the alarmist propaganda, then it's a slippery slope to saying, well, maybe this is fake and this is fake, and they're not. These are real, but it's covered in trash.
There were some really good older videos put out by a guy named Denier Bud. You ever seen those? Those are top quality.
That guy, yeah, he's awesome.
But in regards to all this subject in particular, what I find
got
most
a new
fascinating,
one, by the way, about the OSS and the Nuremberg trial.
Oh, really?
That's what I
no
heard.
Kidding. I'll have to look for that one. But yeah, what I find most fascinating is the mindset of the guys who worked in psychological operations. Because the more I learn about psychological operations and guys like R.H. Knapp and these guys who actually wrote out the manuals on how to do this stuff, it's unbelievable.
Have you seen the Spinning Squirrel?
Of course.
A couple guys, whoever put that together, definitely went deep into psych warfare for sure.
But those guys, like, I'm fascinated with guys like C.D. Jackson and R.H. Knapp and even General McClure, who was in charge of the psych warfare stuff.
I mean, they're bringing in Alfred Hitchcock and Billy Wilder, like the Hollywood, the Spielbergs of the day.
I love the props with like the head split in half in the case in like the formaldehyde.
I mean, it's got shock value for sure. But I just don't see the point in it. They piled up a bunch of bodies too. Like, look at this pile of corpses, like, oh, that got stacked like Legos. Like, oh, really? Did the Germans do that and left them out there in the yard? Come on. Like, it's shocking enough that you don't need to add all this ridiculous stuff. Just say what happened. It's horrifying. You don't need the formaldehyde heads. And
I see I envision that there was a distinct turn in our understanding of history post the creation of these intelligence agencies and psychological operations.
So one of the first things they did was start whitewashing history.
Yes, but how much of history was whitewashed before that? How many kings rewrote history, or how many presidents and other countries rewrote their own history? I mean, is any of it real?
Well, they all have always lied about history, but not to the level of soap and lampshades. Like,
That's some wild shit.
When
And
think about any other war, right? Any other war, Franco-Prussian War, Napoleonic Wars, whatever. You never heard that, right? Like that, and then they turn the bones into a chair or something. Like it's because it's too over the top,
right.
and it wouldn't work without TV. You just wouldn't be able to reach enough gullible people. Like there's a lemming effect. A lot of people will go along with the group think because they have fear opposing the group. They don't want to be ostracized. Their opinion is not based on what's reasonable to them. It's based on what do I have to say to be on the winning team. And so television is able to reach the lowest common denominator. And they all think, like, this is why late night comedians are so effective for political propaganda. No one wants to be the one being laughed at. So if they have a laugh track or a crowd and they are like, well, everyone knows, it's so stupid, then that's what they're going to say and repeat. If they all hate Trump, then they hate Trump. And you could hate Trump because of the dumb stuff he did, but that isn't it. It was identity politics. Well, like, oh, well, obviously it was all the comedians are attacking the same person. Like, well, if all the late night comedians are attacking this guy, but not the opponent, what does it mean? Because they lie about everything. Like, how could you not be having a field day with Hunter Biden? Like, where's the SNL skits about that?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to write anything. You just tell the truth. It's already a comedy. Just, looking for crack and Parmesan cheese. And he slept with his dead brother's widow, cheats on her with a prostitute who he gets pregnant. And then he tries to deny it's his kid, but it was. I mean, who goes after their dead brother's wife and then goes to a hooker and then gets her pregnant? And then it just goes on and on. That should be, I mean, the amount of drugs he's doing and getting foot dry, and it's all on video. It's all on this laptop. Him doing the deals and all the corruption gaffed and just, it's insane. They made these deals with Burisma and then these oligarchs in Russia and then deals in Romania and all the deals with communist China, including nuclear energy. It's all right there. They should be slinging the jokes. The mud on the Biden syndicate is enormous and could get picked apart. And they would have if the donor class was, not behind Biden. All the comics and stuff would be dicing them to bits. Instead, they're still talking about Trump. He's not even there.
So allegedly, the Biden financials made their way to the House Oversight Committee. Is that anything? Is this fluff or what's up with this?
It's, to me, it's like I believe it when I see it. It's a blah
Right.
blah blah, waving your finger. It's like the UN condemning people that break resolutions. Nothing happens unless the US is on board. I mean, look at recently, Tucker Carlson blows the lid off of January 6th. And Republicans can gain control of the House, and they got this footage released, goes on Fox News, shows it was not a armed white supremacist insurrection. It was like mostly COINTELPRO and a couple hapless characters that are being led around the building, escorted by police. And they zoomed in on that Jacob Chancey guy, Chanley, whatever his name is, because he looked like a goof. He's wearing a buffalo hat and he's got like a flag and no shirt and tattoos. And it was like everything the left fears. Somebody who's tall and kind of in shape and like loud and whatever. But it was just some QAnon suckered, drug addict that was like, oh, yeah, he fell for all of it. And COINTELPRO was like, we got a guy, right? And so they let him in. They just let him in. Now follow him around, put the camera on him, This will be the poster child of this event. He's just walking around pretty much by himself, no army behind him or anything, with, hey man, and just like and talking to cops. And they just let in these characters and created an event. And then COINTELPRO's outside breaking windows and stuff and being like, come on, it was good. And a lot of people weren't having it. They're like, what are you doing? Like, the door's open. Why are you breaking the window right next to it? Because they're doing it for the camera. They had photo ops. The whole thing was staged. Like, they needed to disrupt the hearing on election fraud. When it got to Arizona, they were going to make their case of what they honestly believe were anomalies in the election. And it had to be physically shut down. They're like, we're going to disrupt it. And they did. And they got these QAnon suckers to go in the building. The camera just zoomed in on anywhere they could create a pocket of violence, which they had agents dressed as Trump supporters in there acting a fool and being violent and trying to get others to do the same. And when asked about it, they couldn't answer. Did you have plainclothes agents, dressed with MAGA hats and thing? Oh, we can't answer that. Like, so yes, Ray Epps and a lot of others. It was COINTELPRO.
The whole thing was pretty obvious. I mean, I remember I was probably sitting there watching their messaging 3 or 4 people, and all of us were just like, this is what they're doing. This is what's going to happen.
Yep.
What gave it away was like all these people were rampaging through the Capitol, but they were staying between the roped off areas. That I thought was the dead giveaway.
Because it was not an insurrection. They didn't bring weapons. It definitely wasn't white supremacists. I mean, they just throw that on everything, right? Because that's a conversation ender. When you say white supremacist, Nazi, it's like, well, got to be against that. Because just that accusation will do it. They'll say it. Well, we all know Nazis are bad. That's the one we didn't do, right? So that's drilled into your head. It's like the only thing you're allowed to say is evil, because everything else is cultural relativism, right? They'll make excuses for it. The only things ever evil in history are Nazism, slavery, and colonialism. That is the only bad things that you're actually allowed to condemn. And so if they just call them white supremacists, then even when an innocent woman gets shot, an unarmed woman is shot and killed, they're defaming her by acting like Ashley Babbitt was part of some white supremacist insurrection of, treason against the United States. It's completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And they've defamed her. They murdered her and then basically called her a Nazi to justify their violence. Well, since the state killed some protesters, we're like, yeah, well, those were, basically.
Well, my take on it,
neo-Nazis.
if there was a real insurrection and people were violently breaking into the Capitol with weapons, then they would have shot everybody who came through that door.
Well, that door would have been Swiss cheese. If it was an insurrection, they wouldn't have needed to get to the door. They would have shot it from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
If it was an insurrection, they wouldn't have even gone through the door. They would have walled them in and burned it. I mean, like, yeah, stay in there. You're all going to die of smoke inhalation. Like, if it was an insurrection, you don't even need, I mean, if all those people had been armed and were like actually trying to take over the government, they could have. I mean, but that never would have gotten to that point because the cops wouldn't have allowed them in and waved them in and moved the barricade and unlocked doors. Like, none of that would have happened. They were allowed in and waved in, and then internal doors and things were unlocked for them because they needed to disrupt what was happening below. And what was happening is Arizona, because it went alphabetically, was making the case of election irregularities. And there was no way they were going to let the American public hear that, because all anybody had heard, since YouTube and everybody was censoring everything reasonable, was the nonsense from like Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell and stuff. Now, all that Q stuff went all over Twitter, all over YouTube, and they left it alone because it was stupid. And so they're like, the election wasn't stolen. I've heard those arguments, and all of them were dumb. I'm like, you heard Lynn Wood's, Sidney Powell arguments because the dumbest is always the loudest, because the actual irregularities that someone like Larry Johnson could point out, or some like even myself, that definitely happened, you don't get to know. I mean, you don't even have to worry about mail-in votes or any of that. Just the fact that they had 3 liberal moderators in a row for all the debates, and they flat out lied about Hunter's laptop, saying, nope, that's been debunked. Other people in your own administration said so, Trump. And they even called it Russian. Oh, the Russians made that up. No, it was real. It's a real laptop. 3 of them. It's full of incriminating evidence. Hunter Biden should be in prison. He's not. That alone is election manipulation. When you're going to censor one side who's telling the truth about their opponents who are engaged in criminal activity that if you or I or anyone else did it, would be in jail.
Well, the thing it emphasizes to me is that none of the systems that we have in place in this country are legitimate at all anymore. It's become pretty obvious.
They can't even get a train from point A to B anymore.
Right. So speaking of trains, so I'm up in northern Colorado, and I hear a train pretty frequently every night, pretty much. That's probably about 1.5 miles away. So I went and looked up the trains here in town. There's 3 that come through. 2 of them are mostly local that go just throughout Colorado. One of them is the Union Pacific. And so I go to the Union Pacific website, and the first thing I see on their website is that they are proud of their board that is fully diverse, equity, inclusionary, whatever the fuck that means.
What happened
I don't
to
even
some
know.
of these banks that are failing?
It
It's
is
so much time on equity hires and diversity and this nonsense. And
well, because these people think that these corporate jobs are just show. They just show up there. They can get their $400 a day lunch stipend, and they don't really have to do any actual work. They just have to pretend that
they have to be of a
doing
particular category so that they can say we hired a such and such.
I really don't understand how, particularly with the LGBT thing, how who you fuck should determine who gets that position. It's unfucking believable. I mean, this is beyond clown world. To me, the notion that the government has the balls
Well,
to
you
ask
see how
for
they
any kind
slid
of
in the
tax money
T.
is ridiculous.
LGB is a sexual orientation. T is not a sexual orientation. T is
Correct.
a person pretending to be the other sex.
Correct. If you ask me, these are just female impersonators. I think they got the term correct in the 70s.
Yeah, and sometimes male impersonators, but it's mostly dudes that want to be chicks. They confuse feminine and masculine with female and male.
Well, when I start to look into this,
they have it's the ultimate prejudice because it's teleology, right? They're like, well, girls are supposed to be like this and like these things, and guys are like this and like these things. That's why they can't define a woman, because woman is just whatever is in their head as being someone that enjoys being effeminate.
Right. It seems as though all of these things are being pushed on us intentionally. And when you look at who's actually behind this, it always leads to the same places. Particularly, and I think I don't know if you and I discussed this, but the Aspen Institute and the Pritzkers, which connects to their weird occult nonsense that they're
Paul
doing.
Paul Nitze was in that Aspen Institute, the Operation Northwoods guru.
Yeah, that's some weird shit because like they get 99% of their money from the federal government.
That's when Judith Miller was in jail for 85 days. It was getting poems with Leibowitz. They're talking about aspens connected at the roots because the trees connect like that. But it was a cryptic message about the Aspens Institute.
And then I realized that this isn't the first time in history that this has happened. This happened before, particularly in Germany post World War I, with the influx of seemingly mass numbers of Jewish communists who started to push these kind of ideologies and in an attempt to undermine the culture of Germany, which really is probably a quarter of the way through the story of Adolf Hitler, right? Because they like to start the story in the middle again. But this
they skip World War I.
Right,
and the Treaty of Versailles. It was just like there was just this maniac, and he just this magic orator and convinced millions of people to go along with these crazy ideas. And then he attacks all his neighbors for no reason at all. Like that's the World War II story, and then
Right.
just skip World War One and skip the Franco-Prussian War before that, and it's
But I think the most important thing that most people never are taught about World War II is that prior to that, the cultural undermining of Germany, which was going on, which
we're in
Hitler talks
Weimar
about in many of his
today.
speeches. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the inflation is out of control.
Mhm.
Our culture is completely being attacked. Every system, education, transportation, you name it, they're all being intentionally destroyed.
You seen those guys with the trench coats that they used to open up and they like, you want watches? I got watches.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're like the guys walking around. He opens up the trench coat and it's like cartons of eggs.
Yeah, so eggs, I don't know what happened with eggs because eggs came back down to normal prices around here.
Well, good.
And I live in a place that's normally everything's expensive. But yeah, eggs are back down. Well, this is what they do. Eggs are $3, right? Then they go to $10, and then they go back down to $5, and everyone's like, "Oh, cool, they're back down to $5."
Mhm.
So, but yeah, the squeeze is on. Financially, everybody is fucking hurting.
That's what they do the gasoline too. Like, we'll make it take it from $2 to $4, and then lower it at 3 or 3.5, and they're all and like, oh well, at least it's not 4.
Yeah, after the election, the prices dropped to $2.50. Now they're back at almost $4 again, but there's been no reason why. There's been nothing on the news, nothing specifically that prompted a spike. It
Well,
just all of a
they
sudden went
stopped
right back
bleeding
up.
through the strategic reserves.
I see.
They were the only reason that was floating it temporarily is they burned through the reserves, but now they can't. So it's not good,
I know
man.
this country that has a ton of oil, and if we made a deal with them, we could get it really cheap. It's called Russia. You ever heard of them? If we were to actually make
they had
friends
a
with
lot
these
of natural
people,
gas too. What?
we could have like $1.50 fucking gas again.
Mm-hmm. Europe was prosperous because of its relations with Russia, the cheap oil and gas. They've run that away, possibly forever.
See, this hatred of Russia goes back. The more I research, the more I realize this thing goes back like 1,000 years, and ultimately, I see the hatred for Russia today as a direct result of the Russian expulsion of the Khazars into Europe in 1220 AD, which corresponds with the Ashkenazi settlements in Germany and Poland around 1220 to 1240. So I think this is a 1,000-year fucking grudge against Russia is what's been happening as long as we've been alive.
It's
and
also
beyond.
in recent times it's been specifically on Putin because he threw all these Jewish oligarchs out of the country, and he stood up for Syria, he stood up for Iran, and he's a Russian nationalist. He puts the interest of the state and the nation above a particular ethnic group. That whereas before the oligarchs, the interests of that donor class ethnic group always came before the nation.
Is he the first Russian leader to do that? I mean, is he that significant in this respect?
We'd have to go all the way back to like the Tsar. I mean, because from like, Yeltsin and Yeager, Gaidar, and obviously Stalin, Lenin, they're all trash until Putin, pretty much.
Well, they were all
Gorbachev
Jews.
was weak. Like Yeltsin was completely owned by the oligarchs. I mean, he was a drunk in and out of the hospital. Yeager Gaidar ran that country into the ground. He was, Boris Berezovsky's media petrified Yeltsin. What are you going to say? They knew the power of the press. They knew it. Putin just hater gonna hate. He's losing the PR war and the press war horribly. Like, as good as Russia is on the battlefield, they are as bad on the newspaper. RT got banned. Telegrams even banned people.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't allowed on any of the other platforms except for sort of Twitter. They're getting crushed in the PR, in the fantasy war. Ukraine's winning according to Twitter's Reddit sphere or whatever, right? Even though they already lost a big chunk of Bakhmut and they're fixing on losing the rest of it. But it was just Snake Island, Ghost of Kiev. The Russians can't do this. Putin's got every cancer known to man. Well, it's a bunch of opium, and it's like, no. Here's the reality. Ukraine already lost Crimea and the whole land bridge up through Zaporozhye and the entire Donbass minus Bakhmut. And they're going to lose some more. And they've run through a whole generation of men dead by they continually throw them into the meat grinder. And, you know, the Wagner group and others are just wiping them out.
How do you think it ends for Zelensky? And how much patience do you think Putin is going to have before he just takes out Kyiv?
My dream would be tar and feather, but it's unlikely. That's
I think
how
that
we
went
used
away
to
a
keep
couple
him in
hundred years
line.
ago.
That's what we used to do. He looked like a chicken. He's probably role played that out anyway. He's a freak. You know, him and his stilettos and his weird leather. Ugh, that's it. He's a comedian. Kolomoisky picked a Jewish comedian and made him president. Disgusting. You know, how's it end though for real? Like, probably other Ukrainians will have to take him out, because if they continue to just, you know, throw more fresh bodies off a cliff, I mean, Russia's not going to end it. They're like, well, you're the ones getting killed. Then there'd be a coup again from within Ukraine. That's one option. Another one is he'll have to flee after Russia crosses the Dnieper, and he'll be exiled somewhere, and everyone will look at him like he's a big hero, like they did Dr. Fauci. But Ukraine is done.
Yeah.
With or without Zelensky, it's over for them. They don't have any chance of winning this war.
Is it at Syria levels as far as destruction?
No, Russia's not wiping out civilians the way ISIS did, but as far as like wiping out the personnel in the army, I think it's worse than Syria. Like they're throwing in teenagers and old men at this point. It's, you know, it's millions of them fled the country. So refugees the biggest thing, but they've lost 100,000 guys, 120,000 guys. And that's a big chunk. If you, for a country that size, you lose 120,000 able-bodied young men. That's going to be hard to replace. And then they've lost the Donbass. Like all the people that live there, that's no longer Ukraine. That's part of Russia now.
Yeah.
So they lost millions right there, and they lost all that territory, which was worth billions and billions of dollars, right? And then they've lost all this personnel.
So who actually rebuilds Ukraine? Will Vladimir Putin step in and do the rebuilding like I assume he would, because he's that kind of guy?
The side
or
he's
would the US
annexed
do it?
has already started reconstruction. So whatever he ends up taking, whether it's if he stops at the Dnieper River or not, that will be rebuilt by Russia, because that will be part of Russia. As far as what he doesn't take, if he just levels Odessa or whatever, Ukraine doesn't have the purse or infrastructure or personnel to rebuild, so they'd have to invite in Western powers from the US to Japan, like, to come in there and rebuild it all.
Or they could form a relationship with Putin. I think that I think him moving in and doing the noble thing of rebuilding the country would be it would go back to the benevolent leader that I think.
So you're trying to make sense of what they ought to do. Your question is, what will they do? What they ought to do is not what they will do. Yeah.
So recently, your last film was Newc.
That was an
incredible film. It is a beast. It's a beast to watch.
Some of it right there, the black map there.
I see it.
Yeah, this is distracting right around here, but yeah, there is.
There's just too much information in that to digest. I mean, I think I've watched it 4 times now, and I still need to go back and pick some things out from it.
Do you see that second generation of Sonborn Institute bled right into the mega group of Les Wexner and those goons with Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, that's wild. But I see the Sonborn Institute morphing into the official aid package for Israel. I mean, it's like it just went legit, because the Sonborn went for 25 years. We can say with certainty that David Ferry's activities from 61, 62, the breaking into the bunkers in Homa, and he broke into 2 other bunkers that no one ever talks about, all run by the fucking CIA. All those arms end up getting sold to Interarmco, which was a company out of Virginia, right? So we know that because of Gordon Novell. I love when some of these guys they just run their fucking mouth and they tell things that they don't understand the significance of, and that's the best. Like Gordon Novell, that schmuck, didn't know the significance of Interarmco in the bigger picture of things. He just knew that's where they sold the weapons to once they sat at a guy Bannister's office
like David
for a while.
Ferry, right? What does the public know about David Ferry? They know the movie JFK.
Right.
That's all they know about David Ferry. Is he was it Joe Pesci played him?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
I mean, it was a great role. You have to admit. I mean,
yeah,
it was a propaganda film, but it was a great propaganda
he had
film.
alopecia too, and his eyebrows.
He didn't have alopecia. He didn't have alopecia.
I'm telling you what the movie said. Just chill out. Like, the movie. Well, Arnan Milchan is a executive producer, the largest arms procurer for Israel. Is the executive producer. They didn't mention Israel. They did mention Permadex.
Here's one thing. Let me stop you right there. One of the Easter eggs. There's a scene where they're in the fucking room with Garrison, and he's like in this, with the other lawyers, and they're all talking. And one of the guys is reading a newspaper, and inside the newspaper is an article on Israel's nuclear program.
Mm-hmm.
they throw the fucking.
They gotta
hints
throw
at
the
you.
little. Yeah, we know. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. There's a bunch of things like that in there. He mentions when he's talking to Clay Shaw, he brings up Centro Mundial Comercial, and then he just brushes over it like it didn't exist.
They say like, "Oh, you think the mafia could cover things up for the X number of years?" Like, you think the mafia is just an independent criminal organization with no ties to states? Because you're wrong.
I mean, it's unbelievable. The reach of the U.S. mafia via Meyer Lansky reached around the world. I mean, holy shit.
He
all
really
over Europe.
is the Black Widow in the middle of that web too.
I'm sorry, who was? I didn't hear that.
Lansky.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a fascinating character, and I think it's unfortunate that it's taken this long for a lot of information to start to come out about him. It's only been the past couple of years that I've actually seen interest in him. There was that Lansky film actually came out with the bad lieutenant. I always forget his name. Harvey Keitel.
Well, they limit Lansky's activities to just French Connection and Lucky Luciano. They don't get into Kennedy or Israel's weapons or any of that. Never.
No.
Yeah.
But I think Lansky's role in like the global drug trade, going back to the 1940s, that's some fascinating stuff right there. That to me, before his real, well, I mean, you could say his rise to power came in what, 31? 31, right? When he took out Sal Maranzano. But you don't ever really hear too much about his involvement with the drug trafficking throughout the 40s, which is to me just some of the more fascinating stuff that he did.
Well, it's in books. So like, again, Valentine's written about it. There are a lot of authors that have dug deep into Lansky and written about the mob and all that. The problem is, as I stated in the beginning, the Hollywood narrative is always the dominant thing, right? And just that's all most people are gonna know. And what's the other problem is they think they know things that they don't know, and they're like, "Oh, I know about that." I'm like, "No, you watched the movie, and most of it wasn't real. So before, you didn't know anything, and you knew you didn't know anything. Now you still don't know anything, but you think you know things. You're worse off from watching the movie than if you hadn't, because now you believe in all this propaganda that they slid in." But
and of course,
Lansky could be a course. All the things this guy did. Very intelligent man. You gotta give him that.
I think the most fascinating aspect of Hollywood that no one ever talks about is the control of Hollywood, particularly from 66 to 2004, which I believe is an era that shaped the minds of goddamn every single person we know through all the Hollywood propaganda that came out at the hands of the head of the MPAA, of course.
That's a really great point.
Yep. It sure is. Most important man, and one of the most important men in American history that no one's ever heard of.
But
Because
you think about it, like this is the era of they. It wasn't like when TV was invented that everyone got one. It wasn't in every household, right? But by the 60s, it kind of was. Like most every family had a TV, and it had overtaken the radio for propaganda. And that's where it's in everything. It's not just the news. It's this, like, later it would be the sitcoms and the shows and things would all subtly push this propaganda, right? And we're only talking about a couple channels for the news and a few studios for all the movies and everything everyone's going to see. And they realize the hell with MK Ultra and all that. This TV is the best thing ever for controlling what people think, because you get to control what they see, which is tantamount to controlling what they think, because they can only pick Coke or Pepsi. Like, it's this one or this one. We're not going to show you the other ones. So this is what you're going to think.
And you have to look at the creation of the rating system, particularly, was a censorship mechanism. Because at the time, if you had a rated R, you weren't getting advertising money. You weren't getting advertising on television. You were getting delegated to page 6. So they were able to censor movies by implementing the rating system and limiting what people saw by that, which another thing.
Means you can't show the realities of war because that would be gore or whatever. But I think adults should see that Saving Private Ryan scene or whatever. Like, if you knew how horrible it was, you wouldn't be so excited to run in and do it.
Yeah. More.
Show what a baby affected by depleted uranium looks like. That's not going to be on the news, because that would be the end of DU. That would be if the public knew, if there was a widespread understanding that DU exists and what it does, and show the birth defects and things that it causes, that would not be a weapon we use. But there isn't, so there won't be. And so they keep using it. There's even depleted uranium armor and stuff. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
So Ryan, what are you working on now? What's any new movies in the works? What you got going on?
So yeah, right. Well, I just finished the Newc map. So the movie's done. The map just came out this month, and got our shop fixed. I've got some influencers coming to Japan in a few days, and I'm going to be working with them on their projects. I'm more or less trying to get out work I've already done, because I've just got my Twitter back in January, and so we're kind of rebuilding since I was thrown off YouTube and Meta and everything else. Rebuilding A&C report, and I think the next film will probably be on the RFK assassination, because it's just way more doable than JFK. And
I think
it will act
I don't know,
like,
but I think the security guard did it.
Yeah, Thane Eugene Caesar shot RFK. Like, that's who killed him. Like, but just knowing a name and that's just who shot him doesn't mean anything without the story.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, I don't know anything about the background of RFK. I pretty much probably going to end up. And as far as, like, I hear things like Jim Braden was in the hotel earlier that day, just weird stuff that connects to Kennedy. But honestly, I don't find it nearly as interesting or intriguing as Kennedy. And Kennedy, I still have like another decade to go.
I think also the JFK story is more interesting. It was one of the coolest puzzles I've ever cracked. I'm just saying, you asked me like which movie, and I just felt like, well, I can do and complete an RFK film quickly. Whereas JFK, I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I want to, and I don't want to. It's so much work. And so, like, Newc just about killed me. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, let's map out all the JFK. And I know the ether is stupid that's coming my way after I put that out, right? Like, I still deal with 9/11 kooks. And I'm going to get all the people that think he was challenging the Fed, or that his driver killed him, or, all the damn nonsense. And I'm like, oh, there's not as much. There is some kooky stuff about RFK, like, ooh, the polka dot dress, MK Ultra, rah, rah, rah. But it's nothing compared to JFK. They buried that under mountains of stupid and misdirection. And it's how long. I mean, it's taking you a while to get your head around it, and there's a whole bunch of dead ends.
July is 5 years.
Thoroughly enjoyed watching you run into all the same crap that I dealt with, and going, yeah. Oh, you're only on that part. Okay. But it's the greatest.
I can tell you with
ever.
certainty that you spent more time on the Israeli connection than I have. But as far as like the micro details of shit that you tend to not delve into, I've pretty much fucking got. I understand all of it. Like, it's ridiculous. It's the story we're told.
I mean,
so
once upon a time
stupid.
I did, but I'm like, it's addicting, actually. Like, oh, do you know this? Because it leads into, there's a lot of other crimes and things that all relate. Like we were talking about the gun running out of Cuba and stuff, and Nicaragua later, and Iran-Contra, and all these things are birthed out of this network that killed Kennedy, and it's endlessly fascinating. But I try to just stick to the macro picture because I've run out of energy. Like, I just I'll talk to you about it, and it's fun, but I'm like, yeah, because you get it, and you're doing your own research and coming up with it, which is, I don't want to tell you an answer. I want you to come up and then I'm like, now I have more confidence in what I come up with because you came to the same thing completely independently. But
yeah, anytime you've ever given me a hint on anything, I usually spend a lot of time fucking trying to figure it out, and then once I figure it out, I'm pissed that I knew it at all. Like, it's like, damn, I wish you didn't tell me that, so. But there's a couple things that I wouldn't have cracked. There's a couple things I can't crack at all right now, like Clay Shaw. I can't crack that fucker at all.
You need to look into the Swiss.
I know about the Swiss, but I can't crack that either. Like, there's a hook somewhere. Like, every aspect of research has a hook that you can get. That hook pulls you in. I can't find the hook. So it's out there, and I will, but I just can't. And it drives me fucking nuts to where after like an hour of like, God damn it, I can't do this again.
It's in this notebook right here. All the answers. I got stacks of notebooks. I had been really kind of on and off looking into JFK since I was 10 years old. First saw this Zapruder film in 5th grade, and it was fascinating. And later the movie would come out. Kind of one thing that movie did do was light a fire under people and get them interested in the whole case, right? Get them.
That's because everything these people do backfires. If you haven't noticed, every fucking thing these people do backfires. They put it out to fucking rub it in our faces.
Their hand, man. It's like when the Oliver Stone one came out, it was, they did declassify big chunk of documents, and what Trump declassified was hard hitting, and it was like, yeah, but he didn't get all of them. Like, but look at what he released. This is really damning information, and you just don't even know what you're looking at.
So that one document, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah,
that one. I actually found that one.
Backers now. I'd seen that before, but
I found it from a 1960s book. But I found that all the stuff that came out in the 60s to late 60s that was pretty fucking accurate got squashed. Like, there are books out there you cannot find anymore that I have been able to find like 2 or 3 pages from that have shit in it that's like been totally squashed, just like
then it gets re-verified with the document dump.
Right.
But that
just like the day of just like
man.
newscasts on the day of an event. They're always different from the shit you see following.
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot of stuff from
Kennedy
September 11th and 12th that never got said again. Like, oh, police have found a van with explosive device inside. We took it to the Church of AIDS.
And with Kennedy, they talk about on the news how they arrested 2 people in Dealey Plaza and that they found the weapon, which was an Argentine Mauser. I mean, they found all this stuff comes out on the day of the event. And then the next, then after that, it's just gone. So, but there's always like a plan.
Bill Decker was dishonest.
Bill Decker. He might have been one of the most crooked lawmen that's ever been. Him and his relationship with Bill Alexander, the DA, like those guys were like modern day Dallas police had to like exonerate like thousands of people because of the corruption in the 60s and 70s. Remember when that happened? I just fucking almost fell off the couch when I fucking heard about that. Yeah. what do you do if you solve Kennedy? Can you walk into the Dallas Police Department and just drop the shit on the desk and be like, this is the case, reopen it?
Well, you almost sound like a maniac because it's like, hey, let me talk to you for the next 9 hours in a row and detail, and you just sound like weaponized autism or something.
Right.
But that's so like I think you'll get to be like me eventually, where it's like they don't need all those details. Like you're gonna scare them. You gotta like slow down and just talk about like Leon Jacob Rubinstein, Jack Ruby, and just the main characters. And here's the gist of what happened, and why they shot him, and who did it, who they hired, and how they covered it up. But if you start getting into like, oh, and guess what they did in Mexico, and guess what this, and and it's talking about all these names they're unfamiliar with. The basic like normie knows Oswald, Ruby, Ferry, Shaw, like the Bannister cell, the stuff that's in the movie. That's all they know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where you have to begin to get your foot in the door if you want to be effective. And all those people are important, but it's just so much bigger than that. You get in George DeMorn's Shield. And
well, the entire story is a series of staged, prearranged events that are assembled very much like a movie would be. Pre-planned, written out. Hey, look to the left while we do something over here to the right. Really, it's a masterpiece of tradecraft. It's unfucking deniable. I mean, you can tell all the mistakes they made and all the rough
monopoly,
things.
So it was like not hard to cover up. Just, I mean, look right now, right? Even right now, like look at all the lies about Ukraine, Ghost of Kiev, and all this crap. It gets debunked in real time. They were so audacious. They said the Russians bombed their own pipeline. That's what they went with. They should have used the Ukrainian yacht story from the day one. But like, okay, well then Ukraine has attacked Germany. Should we institute Article 5 on Ukraine? That's a NATO member, right? So like, it's just the bullshit. They don't even worry about like, why didn't you plant some weapons in Iraq? You said there are all these WMDs and then there weren't. I mean, you could have just put some there and then pointed to them like you did Operation Wash Tub.
Yeah, why the fuck didn't they do that? I can't believe in 20 fucking years I never thought of that.
because it didn't matter. They're like, the public will forget in a day. They have goldfish brain. And they're right. They did it. There were no weapons. They didn't even like lie well because it doesn't matter. It's like what we own the TV stations so that they'll think what we tell them to. And they're right. There's people like us. They're like, hey, there's no WMDs. But there's like, whatever, conspiracy theorists. Like, okay, you'll find out. They murdered so many Iraqi people and children suffering, and they tortured them in Abu Ghraib, and they demasculated the country. That is horrifying. And then they just move along to the next one. Lie about Syria. Oh, he gassed his own people. Blah, blah, blah. It's not true. But if you don't defeat the deception, then you can't stop the wars, the starvation, the bailouts, everything that comes after it starts with propaganda. That's why the truth will set you free. And the most crucial thing we can do is not fiddle fucking around with trying to vote in the right people or the system of government or whatever people argue about incessantly. It's the media. You have to fix the media to fix all the stuff that comes after it. They couldn't lie about Iraq, there's no war in Iraq. If they couldn't lie about Syria, there's no war in Syria. Right? If they weren't able to deceive, they wouldn't be able to have death and destruction.
My question about that is like people who actually watch mainstream news is such a small percentage of what it used to be. When you got people like Joe Rogan doing 20 times the numbers of primetime CNN, is that really as important?
Rogan
as it
was a good
was?
force against the COVID propaganda. Like when he took ivermectin, they lost their minds. CNN, MSNBC were up there going, Joe Rogan's taking horse dewormer, hurt. And no, he's taking ivermectin for people because that anti-parasitic is effective on COVID. I mean, they panicked because they're like, well, this guy's reaching 11 million people. We got to act like he's some sort of nut that just loves DMT and weed, and he's, you know, don't listen to this guy. But it's the propaganda from the late night comedians and the sitcoms and the movies. It's not just the news. They all uniform the same jokes and stuff, like, look, we're all in on it, aren't we? Ha ha ha. And
So
it's
I
that.
have
So
to
you have
ask
to
you,
add all those things, and then social media too. Zuckerberg and, you know, Google, which owns
was Jimmy
YouTube.
Kimmel on the list?
He did know him, but there's no like hard evidence of kitty fiddling. Not everybody they met or took a picture with or rode on a plane is guilty of white collar crime or rape. There's a lot of people that did not know any of that was happening. We have to admit that, even if they suck otherwise. But and Jimmy Kimmel sucks otherwise. I mean, he sucks anyway. Who cares? But no evidence of that. He actually had a very bad relationship with Sarah Silverman. It was just like dating him, but wasn't giving him sex, and it was pretty bad. But whatever. While he's trying to do like a man show or something too. He's like, you're not a man. Like, why are you the host of the man show? You dork. Whatever. The media, though, that's key. Like, breaking the media monopoly is how you stop all this stuff. They couldn't have gotten this COVID panic without global media control. They were censoring doctors. There were anybody that says, hey, I don't think it's as bad as you think. Why do we have restrictions on travel based around a vaccine that doesn't work? Why are you making it mandatory when you don't know what the side effects could be? The way they won is that they just didn't let anyone talk. Censorship. And then the second was the kookification. Just getting to QAnon and Stu Peters and stuff, the microphones, so that the anti-vax community looks like a bunch of lunatics, when it isn't. This is some small faction that's been given media privilege to make us all look dumb. It's a hard thing to fight, but I think Substack and again, Rumble, Odysee, Rockfan, these video platform sites seem to be a way where you can segregate it. The problem is it is kind of cliquish, but I just don't see anything else. Telegram to a degree, I guess.
Well, there's a new protocol that was built by one of the Bitcoin core developers called Noster, which basically acts as a series of relays.
This
is
Ben
just
Swan's thing too. I mean, people are trying this out, but like even Rockfin, right? They pay in crypto. Well, what about people like me that are banned on exchanges? Like, what am I going to do with a Ray token? Look at it? Like, I can't do anything with it. So, but it's good for most, but it's still not good for all. And it's like, look, you're setting yourself up because it all bottlenecks that exchange. You can keep it on a wallet all day, but if you ever want to turn it into real money and use it, you need an exchange. And all these exchanges are insolvent. They've taken out IOUs on their customer deposits and stuff, and like it's very fragile. And I think the government's going to tank those things on purpose. Be like, see how dangerous crypto is? It didn't have to be that way. But, you know, when in your equations, you always have to divide by J. Because you get these FTX and all this scandal. I'm like, well, why did you spend your customer funds? You're not supposed to do that. And you did. And now they can't cash out. And it causes a cascade. And, you know, a lot of the like Silvergate, these like basically a bank just for crypto transactions, they're gonna all fall because it's built like this. I mean, there's no foundation, and so if you screw with the bottom, the whole thing falls. So the next time someone comes up with some great idea, like we're gonna do blockchain and blah, everyone's just gonna go, bleh, heard that before, because they've ruined it. Right. With the
what you're going to see
fuckery
is you're going to see a massive loss in confidence in all of these crypto exchanges and all cryptocurrencies, with the exception of Bitcoin, because again,
all the shit
Bitcoin
coins and maybe Ethereum.
Yep. Ethereum is the worst shitcoin of them all. It is the gatekeeper of shitcoins. And so
but I don't think
basically
people perceive it like that.
they don't, because they're stupid.
But
They're
yeah,
retarded.
but so what? They are. So that's what's going to be, though.
Unfortunately, I mean, I think we'll see the $10,000-$20,000 Ethereum. Unfortunately, that right there is the biggest fucking Ponzi of them all. But Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency really in the world, because part of being a cryptocurrency is decentralization, and Bitcoin is the only decentralized cryptocurrency that exists. Period. But we've had this conversation
It's
before.
definitely the giant, like the one that will be the survivor at the end of all this stuff. All right, we had a couple Shekelchats. One from Odysee, from DMitch192. Says, Russian bot here. From talking to people who are in the dark, I think deep down they know that they are being lied to, but it's just more comfortable to them to not question 9/11 or Kennedy or Ukraine. I think you're right. I think most people know they're being lied to, but then they get lied to again, right? They know the government's full of BS, but then they just fall into the arms of some charlatan. And then it becomes sort of a egotistical pissing contest, because every noob goes, tells it on the mountain, like, oh, look at the thing I heard, termite, brr, whatever. Then they get to a place where when they figure out that's wrong, they've invested in it so heavily and told everybody in such a dogmatic and arrogant way that they can't back up from that anymore. So they just stay the course and stay stupid. We had a 50 from Lone Star Texit, which is a epic fucking name. I agree with Texit. Texas needs a national divorce. Says, this was an amazing interview. As a longtime follower, I must say to the listeners, share this one, you noobs. Thanks, Ryan. Dagalon. Checking entropy. Nothing on entropy. Power chat. I see nothing on power chat. Let me refresh it. Yeah, I think that's it. All right. Well, then we'll see you tomorrow. We've got some very interesting guests coming to Japan. If you have any questions, get them in now. We have some very... Oh, here comes some on Power Chat right before I left. Let's see. Anonymous for 5 says, from your research, is there one top person at the top of the ding ding bell? It's not really shaped like a pyramid, where there's like the fucking supervillain Lex Luthor at the top. But there is a sort of group of people that are definitely into the fuckery more than others. Obviously the mega group. All of AIPAC acts as an instrument for Israeli Zog and Zom throughout the world. And so within the mega group, if you want to see, the principal financer for Jeffrey Epstein was definitely Les Wexner. And then you would say Leon Black, Mort Zuckerman, and even Bill Gates and people like that. Well, you know, a lot of these WF goons. But there isn't really a like a little Elders of Zion council or something. It's not like that. It's more of a sort of a headless operation like the movie Cube, where you've got overlapping circles of profiteering, where the Larry Finks and things like that are definitely a cut above, but it's not like running a boat where you have a captain and a first mate. It's just not structured like that. It's more mutual benefit, and Zog gonna Zog. I thought I heard that go twice, so let me refresh. They've been named, they've been mapped out. Yeah. I mean, back in the day, you had the Rothschilds family and things, but it's not like that anymore. It's more like corporate entities. It is Vanguard and BlackRock. It is lobbies like AIPAC. And it's the state of Israel itself. right? But if you look at the Federal Reserve chairman, the mass media moguls, and the other financial moguls in different banks, those are the most prominent figures. And your billionaire class. It's not technically just the corporations, man. It's the donor class. And you've got a lot of these billionaires that are political and make their money through government assistance. So it really cycles back on us. If you look at my film, Trump's Zionist Ball and Chain, and I did a deep dive on the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, you can just see the triangle between the PA, the Israeli state, and 2 American states. That's how they work. That's how they roll. Other questions? Well, I have some friends in Japan right now, so maybe we'll live stream from here if I can figure it out. Let me see. Oh, we had another one on Rumble. Rumble kicking butt, almost 300 watching. RN Jimzu says, great show. Always appreciate a conversation with Cory. Thanks for all you do. Rainbow Frog. Yeah, Cory and I have spurred out on JFK from now and then when we do that on Telegram Walk and Talks. If you catch it, you catch it. He's good beans, man. He's been on Atwood as well. Very knowledgeable on the nitty gritty details of some of the JFK stuff that I didn't know or I've forgotten. That's kind of stuff's very taxing. Because you have to deal with all these idiots, and it's like all of it. They make a tar baby, and that's what makes researchers. It's not worth it. Like, you put all these hours in, there's no return, right? I could make more money doing E-drama Jerry Springer shit than I could hard-hitting news and like films like Newc and The Empire Unmasked. You can get that poster, by the way. It's pretty badass. I could do all that, or I could also just like do manosphere stuff or film maid cafes in Japan and make so much so quick. Is that the public is just addicted to video games and anime and just low tier, low browed, knuckle dragging kind of crap. It's okay to have hobbies and enjoy things, but man, you gotta at least have some slither of your time for serious work and serious stuff. It just isn't there. And people are gonna gravitate to, what pays the bills. So that's why sensationalism, it's another reason sensationalism takes over. All right, we'll look back on Odysee. Still 10 there. Power chat, boom. Entropy, boom. All right, then. Yeah, 95% of Cozy is useless. It's just like complete Asperger bigots and race realists. That's the only issue ever. Like, yes, races are real. No shit. So what? And next, get over it. They got one thing. Like, 1350, 1360. I'm sick of it. Like, we talked today about the Iraq War. We talked about Ukraine. We talked about propaganda, Hollywood, JFK. Like, a lot of juicy topics. You know what they're doing? But black people. God damn, you suck. Dale Frickin' Tree for 5 just gives a nice big Ric Flair. Woo! Bless Ric Flair. There you go. Yeah, I love pro wrestling and circus stuff sometimes, but it doesn't eat up my whole day. Like, it doesn't prevent me from doing research on real things. But anyway, we'll end it with that. Ric Flair, give somebody a chop. Don't really do that. Have to say that. Give somebody the backhand, the pimp slap. Ric Flair, father of the pimp slap. Nobody chopped better than Flair in any wrestling organization. He's got that down. I'd be interested in who's number 2 after Flair with the most famous chop. What you think? You can leave it in a comment. Peace. And now bouncing boobies.
여기 다섯 흔들어 지금부터 흔들어 춤추 디스코 bien lost.